So next up in our speed research round is Lisa Fitzgibbons. You will all know Lisa, I think, because she was here last year with another study. She's the executive director of the Documentary Organization of Canada, and DOC, of course, is a national organization for documentary filmmakers, producers, and artisans alike. In addition to research, DOC delivers professional development to its 700 members, and they undertake advocacy on their behalf. And some of you, as I say, will remember last year's study where Lisa presented a profile of the documentary industry that addressed some of the challenges that producers were facing. And this study is a follow-up to that work, and it specifically focuses on alternative financing opportunities for documentary producers to explore. And I suspect there's probably some insights here that can be shared with other sectors. So over to Lisa.
Thanks, Karen. Thank you to the OMDC and Telefilm for supporting this research. So making a documentary, where's the money coming from? In the traditional approach, it comes from the broadcaster license, the independent production funds, the tax credits, and the producer investments. Thank you, Karen, for mentioning Getting Real, because it was really the publication of Getting Real, our economic profile last year, that spurred us on. We saw the downward trends in one-off docs, so feature lengths and theatrical. And so we wanted to find out what was going on in terms of, we could see what was not working. We wanted to find out what was working and what was happening with those entrepreneurial and creative documentary makers. So this research focuses on the single documentary, the one-of, the kinds of documentary filmmakers really want to make and that audiences really seek out. We hired Tracy Friesen to research and write the paper and Susan Britton to prepare the case studies, because the case studies are critical to show how things are working and not working on this. So where's the new money? Well, I'm not sure if new money is the right word. But producers are finding new sources of money with crowdfunding, of course, foundation and NGO investment, private investment, corporate branding. Although not all of these financing sources are alternative, they are non-traditional. And DOC's survey found that actually 85% of respondents had used alternative financing. Production budgets varied. There were some small budgets under 100K, but some of them were over 500K. All respondents turned to these non-traditional sources to address a financing gap. So none of these were sufficient to replace the broadcast license, which is really what is at the heart of the matter here when it comes to documentary production. You need that broadcast license to trigger all of the other funding. So what did we find? Well, crowdfunding is the new kid on the block, so to speak, and it's popular. In 2013, it was expected that crowdfunding would raise in excess of $5 billion globally. But to put these figures in perspective, the annual global crowdfunding support for the category of film and performing arts is less than the one-year budget of the Canada Media Fund. And how successful are the campaigns? Well, in the summer of 2013, Kickstarter showed that roughly 40% of all campaigns achieve their goals. So that's only 40% that achieve their goals, while Indiegogo's site revealed that 72% of projects reach less than 25% of their target. So that's a significant amount of projects that don't reach 25% of their targets. In terms of amounts raised, the majority of successful feature-length campaigns raised amounts in the range of $10,000 to $20,000, so not huge amounts of money. What about foundations? Well, by virtue of a film's topic, doc makers can seek financing from foundations for their projects if they can align with their charitable goals. This is very specific to documentary, obviously, and not necessarily something that drama producers could undertake. It's a very popular financing approach in the US, where producers can turn to fiscal sponsors who can issue charitable tax receipts when a donor wishes to support a specific production. In Canada, our charitable sector is much more conservative, investing very little in media production. It's also tightly regulated, no surprise, by CRA, and donations can only be made to qualified donees. On private equity, the research shows that the most common form of private equity employed by doc makers is the friends and family plan. I think many of us know that plan well. I think there's a recurring theme with mothers' basements. I think lots of documentary filmmakers are living in their mothers' basements. I don't know what happened to the dads' basements, but mothers figure prominently. Here, too, the U.S. is ahead of the Canadian production sector, especially in regards to impact investment, which seeks a return on a double bottom line, financial and social impact. In the U.S., you have a group like Impact Partners, which is a group of 30 investors who finance a slate of documentaries, including The Cove and How to Survive a Plague. Most projects must already have secured significant market support. So Impact Partners investments is typically what comes to close the financing, and their investment range from $10,000 to $100,000 or more. On corporate branding, there are possibilities where companies and content might intersect. Straight sponsorship and product placement are the most familiar, but there's also affinity content, where a corporation's main objective is to get the project story connected to their brand. Most notably here, we found films from the mountain culture. I didn't even know that was an expression. So the mountain culture community that try to carefully balance the sports orientation with social and environmental messages. What did we find? Well, for every non-traditional approach, there are advantages and disadvantages. Crowdfunding. It's a great advantage. Yes, you can raise money, but more importantly, almost, you're raising an audience. The disadvantage is that it's time-consuming and it can grind the tax credit, which is critical to a documentary's financing. Foundations and NGOs, the advantage there is that you can establish a long-term relationship and develop some new avenues of funding. Many Canadian doc makers are turning to US foundations to find their financing. The disadvantage here right now is there's no existing Canadian mechanism to incent foundations to use media as a means to advance their charitable objectives. With private equity, the advantage, of course, is new financiers that are interested in impact investment. The disadvantage is that it can actually grind your allowable tax credit. With corporate brands, there are opportunities with corporate social responsibility, but it's a tricky field to navigate because you can actually disqualify the production from being considered Canadian content, or a broadcaster may choose to not broadcast it because it contravenes a journalistic code of ethics. So we're not alone. There is a theme to this. Other sectors are encountering the same kinds of issues as documentary producers. We spoke to people in the music industry, in the interactive digital media sectors, and this issue of upfront financing and having these non-traditional and traditional financing systems coexist are common themes to all. The other thing that we did find is that there are other jurisdictions, either in Australia, the UK, or in the US, that offer tools that give us some hope that they could be adapted to Canada. Questions?
I'm just wondering, did you come up with any recommendations when you're mentioning the grind? It seems to me that it's that, 2 steps forward, a couple of steps back in regards to how these things sometimes come up against existing tools and existing funding mechanisms, so that we end up always in a difficult situation. So in your recommendations, do you talk about, okay, let's approach the tax credit people and see about how that shouldn't be in the way of these new innovative ideas?
So as you know, research papers never suggest policy positions, but I can. And so we have a section called Moving Forward, and in it we actually call on all industry stakeholders to come together, because this issue is not pertinent specifically to documentary filmmakers. What's difficult there is the entanglement, if you will, of the tax credit, because if we pick that one apart, we actually need, who do we go to? Where do you start? You start with CAVCO? No, actually, you have to go to CRA. Oh, CRA, oh my God. As soon as you say that, people have the willies and the jitters, you know. So opening that can is very complicated. I'll be brief, but I met with some CRTC commissioners this afternoon before coming here, speaking exactly about the study. And it's great that we can use the study to talk, to engage in these conversations. But it becomes a little bit of, well, you know, that's not our jurisdiction. It's their jurisdiction. Have you spoken to CMF? Well, yes, we have spoken to CMF, but you guys do have the ability to determine what is broadcaster triggered and what's not broadcaster triggered. So I think it's incremental change. But that one is a juggernaut. There's another question.
Hi, Karen Shulman-Dupuy from the Mars Discovery District. I'm just curious because your mention of the impact investing element that's working in the States. I'm curious if OMDC has been working with the Center for Impact Investing here, which is housed at Mars, which is why I would know about it. Because even as a Martian, somebody who's actually familiar with the organization, I wouldn't have actually naturally thought of the Center for Impact Investing working with documentary filmmakers, although, of course, we should, and it makes sense. So I'm just wondering if there's been a conversation on that end yet.
So I'll let Karen take the answer, the question to that. But, oh, did you mean DOC or OMDC?
No, I meant either or.
Okay. So just briefly, DOC has not connected with the Martians yet. So I'm curious to do that. And then on the other thing, though, that the research did point to is just the symbiotic relationship between distribution, and that right now there are no mechanisms for all of those filmmakers who are actually really interested in doing audience engagement, because there are all of these fantastic films, they get shown on TV, and that's it. And yet there's all of these audiences that are really starving for this content, but it gets through these tiny little sort of side systems that you need to get to through communities, and for that there's no support. So producers are actually chasing the next production because they don't have the support to actually get this one out to the audience. But I'll leave Karen to take that on.